What does whatever it takes mean? Well, it means the surplus is no longer the focus for the Morrison government. This was a core part of its re-election strategy. It has been something it has shouted from the rooftops, but not the focus right now.
The surplus is of no focus for me. What matters to me is the human cost and meeting whatever costs we need to meet. But I can tell you this, being in the position of strength that we are now enables us to give what is one of the most significant, if not most significant, response to a crisis of this kind that the country has seen.
Joining me now on the line is Veterans Affairs Minister and Gippsland MP Darren Chester for more on this situation. Darren Chester, thanks very much for your time. We know the story there today has been the fire. At this stage, a minimal threat, thankfully. A bit of rain through yesterday and today. Of course, we know it's a bit of mixed news, though, because it's not enough to dampen the fires and might harm some of the back burning. What's the situation in Gippsland today?
Well, good afternoon, Tom. And as I'm talking to you from the Bensdale Relief Centre, there is light rain falling. It's still overcast and very smoky, but all in all, the rain and the cooler condition is a blessing, particularly for the residents, for people to really have a bit of respite, to take stock of their situation. At the Relief Centre, we had probably 500 people camping and staying here at the Recreation Reserve in Bensdale over the last couple of nights. Well, most of those people have been able to go back to their properties and get on with preparations for the inevitable spike days that we expect in terms of hotter temperatures coming our way. And also, if they've had significant damage, to start getting the next steps in place in terms of what funding assistance might be available to them, what they need to do in terms of starting to repair their properties and whatever that might involve. So, yeah, a bit of respite for local residents and also for the firefighting agencies, a chance to change over crews and that type of thing. So it's calmer, cooler conditions, but we've got a long way to go, as you're well aware.
That veritable sword of Damocles still hovers over, of course, the region, unfortunately. Are people able yet to get back in, as you mentioned, perhaps assess the damage, ready their properties again, even if they have to leave them before the next spike?
Well, progressively that's happening, Tom. We've got we've had an extraordinary response in terms of the volunteer effort. Not just the fire agencies, they've been magnificent, but also had the Red Cross and SCS and other agencies all banding together to help people in their time of need. And the Australian Defence Force presence here has been nothing short of remarkable. I never thought I'd see the day we would have 963 people evacuate off the coast of my electorate. That's happened. We had to evacuate people with those naval vessels. It's quite unprecedented. And then we've had a lot of activity with the Air Force lifting people out of Malakuta. We had an excellent day yesterday. 404 people were moved yesterday to safety from Malakuta to the East Sale RAF base, but today the weather's really clouded in with the smoke and the overcast conditions, which has made flying impossible at this stage. So, that operation is continuing as soon as weather conditions allow, and every window of opportunity the RAF has been taking that, and they've been flying missions sometimes as late as midnight into the early hours of the morning to get people out when they can.
We did have some good news with the latest or the last people missing confirmed alive and well today, but we've got obviously hundreds of properties affected, 2 people at least dead, and we're hoping that's the extent of that number. How's the community holding up there, Darren?
Well, the community is quite extraordinary. I mean, I've had the chance to obviously get amongst people who have lost their homes and others who have had some other property losses around outbuildings and fences and that type of thing, but they're very resilient. I mean, they're getting a lot of support, and the tough days in recovery often are not the first days. It's often weeks and months afterwards as people go back to that big task of rebuilding or fronting up the fact of whether they want to even return to the place they were living in the first place. For some people, they'll want to go back, others won't want to. So we've got to help them in that decision-making process and make sure they're well supported with whichever they decide to do. So the community itself, I mean, we've had such an outpouring of donations that we've had to ask people to stop donating in terms of clothing and foodstuffs, because we've got more than enough in that regard. If anyone wants to make donations, we prefer if they actually made a financial donation through the Gippsland Emergency Relief Fund. That would help. But, we don't want to tell people to stop being so generous, but right now the agencies are overloaded with donated goods. So it's been incredible, and their spirit is amazing. We always knew we lived in a great community. This has just proved it, I guess. But we haven't done it by ourselves, Tom. We've had a massive amount of support. I mean, you go down to the relief centre or you travel out anywhere in the region, you're seeing fire trucks from all over Victoria. I had bumped into a couple of beautiful ladies from Charlton, which is halfway to Mildura from here, so probably 800 kilometres from here, from the Red Cross, and they were over here helping us out. So the people are travelling a long way just to lend us a hand, and we really do appreciate it.
Yeah, it is incredible. I mean, it's still a pretty lucky country when you have this issue of too many donations for clothes and food. As you mentioned, though, financial still needed. So Gippsland Emergency Relief Fund, you mentioned there. What about the economic impacts to the region? Obviously, the immediate fire periods, you think of lives and you hope to save as many lives as possible, but there's something like 70% of annual turnover in a lot of these businesses that rely on tourism over the summer, that 8-week period. They're just going to be crippled by this, aren't they?
You're right, Tom, and it's important to acknowledge it is a very complex operation here in Gippsland right now. We've still got active fire in the environment, and our first priority obviously is keeping people safe, and that hinders a little bit the recovery operation. We can't be putting our agencies, our workers, into places where the fire might flare up and actually put them at risk. So the first priority is human life and keeping people safe with the active fire and making sure we're well prepared for any further outbreaks. And then the recovery mode, where areas have already been burnt, making sure they're safe to go back into is critical. So that's a big role, I think, for the Australian Defence Force. The Army's here helping us out now, which I think is going to be something we've never seen before in terms of the scale of the operation. They're going to help in just keep getting access back to places. Our biggest challenge in a community like ours, where there's a lot of one road in, one road out type communities, is making sure that road access is up and running as quickly as possible. We've relied very heavily on helicopter drops over the last 6 or 7 days, and they've done a remarkable job getting supplies into places that wouldn't be able to be accessed by road at this point. But in terms of the economics, Tom, you're right, it's going to take a lot of work from here, and I'd certainly welcome the Prime Minister's announcement of the $2 billion fund. That's something that will give some confidence to even people at local government level about how they're going to look to repair infrastructure like bridges that we're missing now and other assets in the community that we've lost. So I think that's a very welcome announcement. For the small businesses in particular, I mean, we normally get fires here in the sort of February or March period, which means the tradies or the traders have been able to get through a summer period and had a chance to get money in the bank. Getting these fires now really does hamstring some of those tourism businesses who, as you said, they might have 50 to 70% of their turnover in a very short amount of time, and that's the cash flow that gets them through the winter months. But, we're going to miss out on that this year, and so we need to make sure we're supporting them as much as possible.
I guess we've got to hope as well the rebuild happens as quickly as possible. These beautiful areas such as Malakoot are a visitor. Again, I know you'll be doing your best with the hashtag Love Gippsland, but are there areas right now, and I'm very cautious here to make sure we're talking about areas completely unaffected by fire and not going to affect people getting in and out of different areas, including emergency services, but broader Gippsland, where you're saying, hey, it's still okay in parts of this because it's a big region?
Absolutely, Tom. Gippsland is a huge region, and we just encourage people to pay attention to the warnings, but locate where those warnings are and then decide whether it's safe to travel. Right now, obviously, the East Gippsland region, we don't want unnecessary travel through the region. No. The roads are blocked in some parts. The agencies have to do their work, but there's other parts of Gippsland which are perfectly safe to visit. You can still get out here and enjoy a great holiday, but the eastern part of my region's got a bit of a hiding, Tom, and we need to work our way through that. We'll get through it. I mean, I'm very optimistic and confident that we can work our way through the challenges. We just need a bit of a break in the weather. I mean, we've had 3 years of drought, so sure we'll cop a decent break of rain at some point, and that'll help everyone enormously. And then it's a question of making sure that the recovery work we do, that the local businesses, the traders get a chance to do some of that work, so they'll benefit from that. And I'm very keen to push that with the Prime Minister at my first available opportunity. And we're going to need a bit of a hand. The Australian Defence Force has been terrific. At some point they won't be here, and we'll have to keep on doing that work by ourselves. But we're certainly welcome of all the support we're receiving. And there's a big job ahead. It'll take a couple of years. There's no question it'll take a couple of years. But I'm very confident we can get our way through it.
In terms of lessons to be learned out of this, we saw during Black Saturday one of the big issues, a different, of course, a lot of these places, a different part of the state, but a big issue was one way in, one way out. You alluded to this earlier as well. Was that a factor again? Do we need to look at having other ways out of these small towns?
There's some parts of my electorate where the sheer topography, so the mountains and the valleys that are here, means you're only going to ever have one way in or one way out. But the messaging around when it's time to leave, I think this time was much stronger than Black Saturday, and I think that probably saved lives. I think we learnt from Black Saturday in that regard that on these extreme fire danger days, there are some places of our beautiful nation that you simply can't defend your property, no matter how well prepared you are. And I think we learned that lesson well from Black Saturday. And while there has been some tragic loss of life, and I'm not downplaying that at all, it's not been of the magnitude that we suffered on Black Saturday. I think we haven't really learnt the lesson, though, in terms of the prescribed burning or fuel reduction burning. That was a message that came out strongly from the Black Saturday Royal Commission, and I don't think we've learnt that lesson. I think my people in my community are saying to me they want to see more preventative burns in the future. They want to see... What
makes you say that? I mean, the fire commissioners are saying a lot of that is down to when you can do it, the window is narrowing. What makes you think that hasn't been learned? Are there examples you want to give?
Well, no, Tom, the point I'm making is that the biggest priority right now is responding to the fire that we have, and that's no one's taking away from that. But the message coming to me clearly as I walk around my community is that they want to see more preventative burning, more measures put in place to protect the township. So that could be mechanical clearing or that type of activity, or even using grazing more effectively, using grazing to reduce the fuel load in the bush. So the people who live in this community are saying to me very clearly that hazard reduction is something we need to do more of. And this is not a criticism, this is just acknowledging this is what people are saying to me. What happens is, when we get the good days, the conditions are right and we're able to do some burning, we don't have enough resources to burn over a big enough area to achieve the targets that the government set for themselves, the state government set for themselves. So I think we need to look at how we provide more resources in the future to make sure that can happen.
Right.
So it's not about being a Monday morning quarterback and telling fire authorities how to do their job. It's about acknowledging that the community is saying to me quite clearly that hazard reduction needs to be a higher priority. We love where we live. We love this beautiful bushland environment we get to enjoy on a regular basis, but we need to be able to be safe as we possibly can be, and hazard reduction is part of the answer.
And do you fear these types of fires will be more common and more likely with the impact of climate change?
Well, I think there's no question that we live in a hot, dry climate, and the forecasts are for more severe weather events in the future. So we have to adapt our response as people in those communities to acknowledge that. So that's why when I talk about hazard reduction, part of the acknowledgement of the climate change that we're experiencing is changing our approach to hazard reduction. I mean, that means having more resources available to reduce the threat to humans. We're going to live in these communities. We love where we live. We love Gippsland. It's a beautiful part of the world, but we need to make sure that people can be as safe as they possibly can be. I mean, we need these people living in this community. We need people living here to grow the food and everything that you and I enjoy in our more urban lifestyles. I mean, these are farmers being affected by this. This is not just people living in the bush. These are people where live alongside national parks and state forests. The fire comes out of the bush and threatens their homes, their pasture land. It's not necessarily just people who live in the forest itself.
And that's the approach that we can take on the ground, I guess, in that preventive sense. But in a broader sense, given what's happening right now, should the government be open to Australia trying to lead the charge more on emissions reduction?
But I think, Tom, that's probably a broader conversation to have, because even from all the science that I've read and from the experts who you listen to, they say that no single event can be attributed directly to climate change. It's a longer-term pattern of a hotter, drier climate. So we need to be careful we don't completely link one event like this in East Gippsland, where we've had 3 years of drought, to the broader political conversation you're trying to, I guess, draw me into. My view is, let's get these fires out, let's get the recovery process underway, and let's acknowledge that in this hotter, drier climate, some of our practices of the past aren't necessarily the ones that are going to help us stay safe in the future. But let's have these conversations. That broader discussion should be one that we should have down the track. You're saying recovery right now. I mean, there are plenty of people saying let's also try to be a leader on the global stage. We're not a leader right now, are we? I'm quite happy to keep having the conversation about putting the fire out, about recovery, and about the broader policy direction our nation takes. We can have all those conversations at the same time. But my focus has got to be, as a local member right now, on making sure my community is as safe as can possibly be, and that it's well supported in that recovery process. And I, for one, freely acknowledge that Australia, with less than 2% of total global emissions, is not going to be able to change everything by itself, but we have to play an important role, and I think we are playing an important role. But again, the human face of this tragedy right now is the people in our communities who have lost their homes or lost loved ones, and we need to make sure they're well supported. And as a government, I'm very pleased with the announcement by the Prime Minister today, and I can't be more thankful than the support the Prime Minister and the Chief of Defence Force have given me in terms of providing the Australian Defence Force resources on the ground. To see the Navy, Army and Air Force hard at work in my community is quite extraordinary.
We'll let you get back to that situation on the ground in your area, but Darren Chester, thanks for your time today.
Thanks, Tom.